Okay, Venture 3. Let's do some reflections on that. So, this is the first venture run by Ivan. Disclaimers before we start. This session was put together at very last minute by Anthony, and unfortunately, it was a very difficult day at work and life in general. So there wasn't much time to go over the rules again and familiarize ourselves over with the system. I had barely like 45 minutes, maybe an hour to look over the system. So fortunately, I've been, I've had those cheat sheets for a while now, and those proved invaluable. So long has passed since the last venture that you forget a lot of the game. So we had a chance to look at that a bit over, but not so much the spell section. So, that impacted, I think, the way we played. Plus, getting in the mental space of the game and entering that magic circle, which we've described before, it's a process. And if you're stressed out, and had a busy, long day at work, it's harder. So that may have affected the quality of play. So just putting it out there. Ivan hits us with a very interesting setup, Tamarian, which is nice. It's a different location than we've had. And so he gave us the initial setup, and it was time for character selection. So I wanted to have Anthony go first, because he hasn't had a chance to play, and he's been dying to play for a long time. So I was pretty sure he was going to go for Kai Ernst, because Kai is one of the iconic characters that he created way back when, in those videos in the Runeslinger channel, which I think everybody of us that is playing now, we learned by watching his videos, basically, and then we got the book and followed along, right? So I'm happy that he got Kai going. Ivan described the knowledge thing, the tablet with some strange writings on it, and so I had a choice of characters. I probably should have gone with Falk Wolfram, who's the guy who has actual reading knowledge. But I didn't want to go with the usual trope of the scholar and the scholarly thing, and so I kind of put Falk Wolfram to the side, and so my other choice was Ingolf. Ingolf is the peasant, and I would have played him, except that the last session was very intense for me, and I was very focused on my own character, and I honestly did not. I heard everything that Ivan did, but it was a weird experience where I did not internalize a lot of what he was doing, to the point where I didn't feel comfortable playing Ingolf, right? I felt I didn't have enough to give an adequate representation, although Ron has specifically told us that you don't need to recreate the exact same character, that the experiences of the characters change them. So it's up to us to interpret the character, and it's okay if it comes out differently, right? So, but still, I don't know, it felt off. I probably should have, just to shake things up, because the alternative was playing one of the wizards, right? Which is the other thing you would expect. So I also had Anselm, which is Anthony's other character, who is kind of a warrior type, so it was also... Wait, is Anselm the warrior or or a peasant as well? I don't think he's a peasant. I think the only peasant is Ingolf. Anyway, I didn't want to... I sort of wanted to leave Anselm for pretty much the same reasons, right? It wasn't like... I don't know, it's a new character starting from scratch. After playing two different characters in the first two sessions, I wanted to see if I could revisit one of the characters and maybe see what's changed. So the obvious choice was Hadric, being a wizard and having been played before, so I know him already, and I want to see I don't know if he played differently or something. I was curious about that, like revisiting the character in not a continuous style of play as we've been doing forever, right? This is a different game, so I thought there might be something to try there. Plus the fact that he already had like 8 points of Emborion on, so I figured he'll get a gift and a mark pretty soon, and that should make it interesting, right? So another pro is that. He's easy to inhabit, right? So I played him before, and it's a character. The way I played him the first time, it's like slipping into an old pair of shoes, right? It's really comfortable. So I thought I could do that, and it'd be fun. But then the cons that Hadrick brings with him is the complexity of playing a wizard in this game. Wizards are complex in all games, but in this system in particular, because I don't have the familiarity with the spell list or the fluency with the casting of the spells and stuff like that, which are ritual, which are not, it's a bit confusing. I'll talk about that when we come to the spell casting section of the actual play, right? But I just want to throw out there that that's one of the cons, right? It was much easier the time I played Otto, because he had his like 4 spells I think he has, but it's so easy to inhabit because if you gotta fight or do something, you pretty much know how that goes. Spell casting opens doors to other possibilities, and regardless of system, there's always analysis paralysis because of options, right? But again, I'll get to that when we get to the spellcasting section. So back to another con that I've seen with Hadrick is the thing with the profession. He's a priest, but the fact that he's also a wizard, I think when I created him as a character, that wasn't the best choice I could have made, because one seems to contradict the other. So, he immediately becomes an outcast priest, right? A heretic priest, which makes it even harder to figure out what he's good for when he comes into a new community, because he's an outcast priest. So it's not like the priest is going to be happy to have somebody to help. So also because of what the priests do in this setting is very limited. They're usually doing something else, and the priest part is sort of like a part-time thing, right? It's not that they're priest 24 hours a day. They're just put on the priest hat when the time comes for ceremony, burials, presiding over some sort of ceremony for the village, or the ritual of the smoking of the weed, and stuff like that. So, immediately, so the game starts, and immediately my first thought is, okay, because of the way the initial charm roll works, you have to integrate yourself to the community before you attempt the charm roll if you want a reasonable chance of success. Now with my wits 5, charm 5, it's impossible for me to charm somebody if I go in cold, right? I have to do some work first. So this is where Hadrick becomes difficult, because the only 2 things that I can think of off of the hand is manual labor. That's pretty much what he's good for, unless he's doing priestly things. And of the priestly things, these priests are like counselors, and that requires trust. So you're not gonna, walk up to somebody and start trying to give advice or grief counseling or stuff like that. It doesn't work like that. You have to build trust over time. So my real options are either work with the weed, with the cannabis, or help with some sort of rituals, like the burial rituals, which is the easiest to help with, right? Is probably the one that really requires some help. The other rituals, marriages or whatever it is, it's not going to require help in the same way. So my first thought is immediately to go to manual labor. But this, in combination with his friendly trait, that already puts people's back up. They immediately sets distrust. So it's even harder. So it always feels when I'm playing Hadrick like I start, one step behind, like I said last night in our post-game short feedback. And it was no different. I tried it with the brewer. The brewer blew me off which made sense, right? You have to talk to these people if I wanted to. If I had seen some barrels, maybe I would have tried to lift one or something. My character is not super strong, but they're above average, so I probably could have helped with that. But it was cool because I got directions to the priest, and the priest scene actually worked. I got to work on the field, and I, managed to succeed at that charm roll, which led me down into the first component that Ivan had already told us about, the tablet and stuff. So, that went well. I don't necessarily want to go, blow by blow on what we did last night, but that, starting with a step behind with Hadrick, it has been a recurring theme. So I want to talk about Anthony. I thought that Anthony's roleplay was fantastic. When we encounter the Racker thing, loading, the beast that could talk, Anthony's character immediately starts talking about martial applications, which goes hand in hand with his character background and profession, and that was fantastic. I knew that from having, listened and watched Anthony's character building video from way back when. I know he's decisive and stuff like that, but man, wow, Anthony was on fire. The characterization was very strong, very sharp, and he just, flowed into it, which was beautiful to watch. His decision to immediately go to the grave and attempt this combined animate and speak with dead was classical. I believe I have mentioned before, well, maybe not here, maybe somewhere else. My favorite book, fantasy book, I think is A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. And I really like wizards. I like the portrayal of the magic, and when I think wizards, the probably the two iconic images that I have is calling on the spirit of the dead to gain knowledge. And I actually did it. If you watch Ivan's Lamentations of Mars game a couple of sessions back, my character did that because I think that's quintessential wizardly thing to do, gain knowledge from the dead. And the other is shape change. I just love those two things. But anyway, back to Anthony. I think his narration of the way he went about performing that ritual, and later on all the magics that he did last night, because he was also playing a wizard, he was spot on describing the way he would go about the magic. I seriously missed that. That was a misstep that I did. I did not engage in the color description flavor of the magic. I was I got a little overwhelmed by analysis paralysis and scrambling to get to the spells and what they did, and I had some ideas. There's a list that Ron has on his website with the spells, and this brings me to discussing the magic. I appreciate the change in the name of the spells to make him evocative and different, and to differentiate the magic system from what you're used to. But there is a drawback to that as well, which is it's like learning to speak a new language when you're playing a game, right? There's a language to RPGs, and that usually means D&D, right? At least for us old-timers. We pretty much got started on D&D, so we tend, the names of the D&D magic spells are shorthand to us, right? That's Magic Missile, that's Sleep, that's Charm, that's Dominate, that's Dispel Magic, that's a Circle of Protection, a Protection from Evil. The new list, the new naming of the spells is evocative, but not... It's evocative of a color, a description. It is not tightly descriptive of what the effect is. So what I did is I printed out Ron's list and I started making little arrows with cheat codes, right? Okay, this is the basically protection from evil. Now it doesn't work exactly like protection from evil. It's white light, I believe it is. But I know, it's in that neighborhood of effect. So if I want to keep evil creatures away, which later comes into play during the confrontation with the floating eye, it's like, that's a demon, I need to keep it away, I need to cast some sort of protection from evil. White light. So I look at my cheat sheet. This is the protection for an evil one. But, I guess if we had a more frequent play of the system, and it hadn't been so long between sessions, I'd probably have greater fluency with the game, right? As it was, it felt a little bit like speaking a second language right there, right? Trying to translate, okay, this is white light, it's protection from evil, what does it do? And scrambling to read the pages because we're on a deadline. We only had 2.5 hours to play. So again, the times that we played this, it's such a pity that we've been playing with these time constraints, and you can see the difference in the session that we just went and kept going, right? And that may not necessarily be true, right? Maybe last session we did have some constraints, and Anthony was very sharp on pacing us, and maybe the game improved for that. So I don't know. I'm a little bit torn. But the time pressure on top of the lack of familiarity with the system was a little bit stressful. This also raised a little bit of problem for me when we engage with the combat. I usually get a little bit caught up. I think I was a little bit more rules lawyery than usual last night for the session. That doesn't come out of a bad place. That comes out of me trying to learn the game raw. Because if I start learning a game with bad habits, it's really hard to break yourself of bad habits. So I try to, when I'm familiarizing myself with a game, stop and look and say, no, wait, we're doing this wrong. We should do it the other way. Sometimes it doesn't really matter. Like I remember a specific point in the combat where I interrupted Ivan and I said, wait, it's this guy's turn, not that other guy's turn. And in the big scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. But, that's a little bit of my own obsessive-compulsive nature in trying to learn the game raw. In trying to follow procedures so that I understand it and I can do it without referencing the book constantly. So, I'm my bad on that. I apologize for interrupting the flow of play. We did say at some point, let's look at the rules. Let's make sure we're doing this right because, the moment we start just changing the game, it loses, right? System matters, right? So I don't know. We ran into that little bit of trouble, or I ran into that little bit of trouble. Let's see, what else can I say about that? So that's pretty much the magic. My thoughts on the magic. Again, I failed basically to describe how I did the magic. It's funny that as soon as the combat situation started, at least I knew like some of the spells that I wanted to cast, right? Like immediately when the guards come up, I'm like, I'm going to cast a spell that makes them fight each other. And then it's just a matter of finding which one of those, what's the name of it? Where is it? But we did. I think that part flowed basically smoothly. There are still areas of the game where it is complex. The combat is complex. It's not simple. That may work against our immersion because we have to stop and really dig into the rules to make sure we're doing it right. That's probably why I failed to describe and the combat felt a little bit removed. I was out of it because I was trying to anticipate what's my next move when my turn comes around so I don't hold it up, so I can keep up a steady pace and I don't hold us back. And I still wound up holding us back. A little bit of analysis paralysis. But, we tried to make the best of it. We mentioned the flow of time, how things seem to escalate. In part, that was Anthony's very intense portrayal of Kai, which is great. It's not a critique. It's just, I liked it. I thought it would flow very smoothly. Anthony was on a roll. He would do one thing and he was like 1, 2, 3 steps ahead. It was relentless, which was great. I'd like to point out that I didn't, when I was faced with a tablet thing, I didn't start looking at it, with the mystic senses and stuff, because I was easing myself into it still. It's probably a missed opportunity. I didn't feel a sense of rush, of that I had to rush it and get it, let's look at it, is it magic? What am I going to do with it? I was maybe in a slower pace because of a slower frame of mind, thinking, the first time we played the game, everything happened real fast. The second time we took our time and, hours passed, days passed, weeks passed. So I didn't want to push it. It felt like, okay, he looks at the thing and there's some knowledge here, and Kai knows more of this than I do. Because at the end of the day, I picked Hadric, but I wanted to avoid the specific cliche which Ron does say. These guys are not the book smart magic using types that you're used to in D&D. Hadric has no real reason to be a learned man, right? That he knows his letters and stuff like that. But I figured Kai would, so that's why I was, I'm not going to push this tablet thing. I'm going to go get Kai. And he's going to, when I come back with him, then we're going to make sense of that. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Because I wasn't really, thinking that deeply on it. I thought we had more time. So anyway, that's my impression of play with Anthony. It was very intense, very interesting. Another confirmation that this is a great group. I'm really fortunate to be playing with these guys. We're taking it just as seriously as I like to take it. That seriously reminds me of the other thing. Something about Hadric. I think I'm playing. He's supposed to be friendly. I think I'm playing him a little bit too obsequiously, and the fact that he tends to miss that first roll if he hasn't done any work or anything makes him into a little bit of comic relief, and I don't know how I feel about that. I normally appreciate humor if it's in character, but this is the game that's supposed to be emotional and deep and dark to a degree. So I don't think I achieved that, and Hadric wasn't helping because of the way I played him. A little bit too friendly, maybe a little bit too obsequious, and then faced with the rejection, then it sort of turns a little bit of to comedy, right? And that part wasn't very satisfying. Fortunately, the second role with the priest, the role is successful, right? So that comedy goes away, and that's when I really started getting deep into the game, deep into the character. Let's see what else. It was an intense combat, even though we stumbled through the rules, and it felt a little bit removed because of the fact that we had to keep going through the rules. So, this session wasn't as satisfying as the previous one. I think the previous one has been the high point for me so far, although the first one was pretty emotional too. There was something, it was the way I played it last night, it wasn't that satisfying. From the emotional, it just wasn't there. It was good play. It was great watching Anthony. I think that was the best part, just watching the way Anthony played his character. Let's talk about Ivan's role. Excellent setup, good description. I love the detail with the village being built on what seemed to be the bones, the bare bones, the residual stone structure from the whatever was there before. That felt good. That felt really evocative. I don't know. It was a good setting. It was different. It was interesting. I really liked that description that Ivan came up with. The situation was great. I think he had a lot of components to juggle, and they made sense, and they were not necessarily intertwined completely, which is part of the admonition and the challenge of the setup, not to tie everything together. That was great. I'm dying to know what tripwire we hit, because I'm pretty sure we hit one. It was either raising the dead guy or confronting the leader with sorcery. I don't know if that's it. Maybe just killing him, which is what we did at the end, because we beheaded him. Kai beheaded him, so that may have been a tripwire right there. The other thing I wanted to say is, again, my portrayal of magic. I love wizards, and even though the fact that Hadric had the Amborion score way up, I wanted to try to honor the philosophy of the circle in balancing it out. So I started trying to cast Urbaja to neutralize the overload of Amborion that he was headed to. Unfortunately, there's a lot of really good, useful spells in Amborion, so I managed to, again, tip the meter, right? I was reluctant to cast spells, like Kai hit the ground running with blessing himself to improve his chances with the charm roll, and I suppose that's what Hadric should do. There's a couple of ways to buff yourself up to do that, and I could have gone that way, but I wanted to try the gray magic approach, right? If I'm full up with Amborion, let's switch to Urbaja and try to walk that line if I can. Again, I wasn't very successful, but it was part of it. And the second part of it is maybe my own holdover from this literature that I like, is the reluctant wizard, right? Wizard is the spells and magic are not to be used lightly, so it felt to me in Hadric's shoes, it felt kind of light to start charming the people as soon as I arrive at the village, right? To boost my charm roll. It didn't feel right for me. I think Anthony used it very well for his character, but it didn't feel right for me to cast it on myself. Because again, I'm used to the type of wizard who doesn't cast until, there's a quote in Wizard of Earthsea, and I'm gonna garble it up. We take magic seriously in Gaunt. We don't play it for amusement or praise. It's something like that. I'll look it up for next time. Maybe I'll write it in the notes. It's one of my favorite quotes. But the idea you get, right? It's you don't use the magic unless it's important. So it didn't feel right to me to start that way. Later on, however, in the combat, it's combat. Hey, anything goes. We have to defend ourselves, and particularly when a group was invoked, it's either magic or run away, and this is the leader of the village. So I felt if we run away from the leader, he's just going to send the whole village after us, and it's going to be worse. So I'm staying here now, and I'm trying to deal with it now. The magic is stressful because it depletes your resources real fast. But fortunately, we were able to take care of the situation, right? We were emerged victorious. In part, it's a shame because we haven't had the man-to-man combat, which I want to see. I want to see the close, non-magical hand-to-hand combat and feel that deadliness right there. That's still on my list, things to check off on this game in particular. So hopefully, we still have time. Maybe next session, that'll be the opportunity for that. What else? The gift that I chose. I initially was, again, in the middle of the game, trying to pick the gift. I didn't want to slow us down further. And then I saw the one about speaking the truth. And that's, Anthony even said, I like that one. And yes, absolutely, I like that one. That one is very evocative of, again, in the Wizard of Earthsea, when the wizards speak the true speech, which is the language of magic, they can't lie when they do. They can speak to dragons, and dragons speak in that language, and the language which makes magic possible, does not allow for falsehood, right? That also puts me in mind of like the Wheel of Time books, where the wizards there, the Aes Sedai, the females, they're the women spellcasters. They take this oath to never speak a word that is false. And yet what they do is manipulate people all the time, and they lie by omission, right? I've actually played in one RPG of Wheel of Time, and I played one of the Aes Sedai. It's like, no, I don't want to play the male channelers or anything. I want to play the females, because they are the ones who have the interesting thing, which is the constraint that you cannot speak a lie. And that was some of the most fun role-playing I've had, trying to imply things, trying to mislead people into thinking I'm saying one thing while I'm saying another, without speaking falsehood, right? Every word is true, it's just the context is misleading. That's a fun role-playing challenge. So when I saw that the truth, speaking the truth would have a magical effect, and it's like, yeah, that's sort of like what the oath in the Wheel of Time does. I want to try that. And sure enough, when we, in the final climactic scene, I tried to speak the truth, right? Just, this is what's going on. This is what we can do. And I think it came out great. It's a completely improvised speech, and I was happy with it and with the way we handled it at the very end. So to me, the most satisfying part was that very, very last scene with the speech. That, and watching Anthony roleplay Kai after so long, and how forceful and how energetic and how driven he was. That was excellent. That might be a fun character to play at some later point, and see how somebody else playing it makes the character feel. Again, as for Ivan, I think his descriptions were spot on, and his juggling of all these things at once was also very nicely done. A lot of stuff to keep track of. And again, he was like under the crunch for the very last minute thing we improvised. So anyway, that's about all I can think of right now. I'm running half an hour. Again, the guy who talks the most, but that's me. That's what you get. And I'll probably remember like 15 things that I wanted to say and I forgot to during the making of this video, but hey, well, we can always talk. And we'll probably do some more talking in Ron Edwards' Add Play site. So that's it, guys. I'm not going to keep you any further. Thanks for watching so far. Bye-bye.